Have you ever felt like the world is just a little bit too much?
Like it's all just a little too loud
Exactly.
or too bright.
Well, you might be a highly sensitive person,
An HSP.
or you might know one. And if that's the case, today's deep dive is for you because we're going to be exploring the work of Shahida Arabi.
Who is an expert on narcissistic abuse and emotional manipulation.
And she also focuses on HSPs.
What's really interesting about Arabi is that she combines her solid academic background.
I mean, she has a master's degree in sociology from Columbia.
Right. With really practical advice.
And her books are super popular for that reason.
Like the highly sensitive person's guide to dealing with toxic people.
Okay, so we're diving into her work today because she has this fascinating idea that HSPs
With all their empathy and depth.
are often targets for toxic people.
Which is kind of alarming when you think about it.
Yeah, it is kind of worrisome, to be honest.
Right.
I mean, I get that HSPs are more tuned into other people's emotions,
Sure.
but why would that make them more vulnerable?
Well, you've hit on a really crucial point here. Being an HSP means that your nervous system is literally wired differently.
Huh?
You process information more deeply.
Okay.
You're more aware of subtleties, and you feel emotions way more intensely than other people.
So it's almost like they're experiencing the world in high definition.
Yeah, exactly. It's like having this high-def experience of the world, which can be amazing. Beautiful, but also super overwhelming.
Yeah, so their sensitivity is kind of like a double-edged sword.
Exactly. And that's where the toxic people come in.
Oh, man.
They exploit the strength that come with that sensitivity, like empathy, conscientiousness, that desire to help others.
And they twist them into weaknesses.
Yeah, and use those weaknesses to manipulate the HSP.
Okay, that's starting to make sense now. So who are these toxic people?
Well, in one of the sources we looked at a YouTube video, Arabi actually identifies 5 types of toxic people.
5.
But honestly, just thinking about all 5 categories is already giving me a headache.
Me.
So how about we just focus on the ones that are most relevant to HSPs?
Okay, yeah, that sounds good.
So, for example, we have garden variety boundary steppers.
Okay.
They can be annoying, but they're not necessarily malicious.
Right.
So we can skip them for now.
Okay, good. Because I'm way more interested in understanding the ones who are intentionally manipulative.
Right. So let's jump right into the more serious types.
Sure, yeah, I mean.
Emotional vampires, narcissists, and in extreme cases, sociopaths.
Emotional vampires, that sounds intense.
They are intense. They're like energy drainers.
Okay.
Think of them as people who constantly dump their problems on you, but never, ever ask how you are doing.
Oh, I know a few people like that.
Right.
You end up feeling completely emotionally exhausted after spending any time with them.
Exactly. And then there are narcissists who are all about themselves.
Oh, yeah.
And lack empathy, and they can be incredibly charming.
Really?
At least at first.
Oh.
They use tactics like love bombing to draw you in.
Love bombing. What is that?
It's like they shower you with affection and attention almost too much too soon. And they make you feel like you're the center of their universe.
But it's all an act.
Exactly. It's all about gaining control once they feel like they have you hooked.
Oh.
They can become cold and distant, leaving you feeling confused and hurt.
That's awful.
In one of the sources we looked at, there was a story about this woman named Lisa who did this to her partner, Mark.
Oh, no.
She would manipulate him with all this affection and then suddenly withdraw, leaving him emotionally devastated.
That's just cruel.
It is. And then on the more extreme end of the spectrum, we have sociopaths.
Those are even worse, right?
They are on the extreme end. They exhibit antisocial behavior, complete lack of remorse, and they're highly skilled at deceit and manipulation.
So how do HSPs protect themselves from all of this? This is starting to sound pretty scary.
Don't worry, we'll get to Arabi's strategies for dealing with toxic people in a bit. But first, let's look at some of the specific ways these types manipulate people.
Okay, so what do we need to look out for?
Well, they use tactics that prey on an HSP's desire to please. Their tendency to overthink and their difficulty saying no.
Okay, can you give me an example?
Sure. One common tactic is gaslighting.
Gaslighting?
Where the manipulator tries to make you doubt your own reality.
Oh.
For example, imagine your partner denies saying something hurtful, even though you remember it clearly. And they might say, "You're imagining things," or "You're just too sensitive."
So it's not just disagreeing.
Oh, yeah.
It's like intentionally trying to make you question your perception of what happened.
Exactly. And over time, that can really erode your self-confidence
Yeah.
and make you doubt your own sanity.
And for HSPs who are already prone to overthinking that, could be incredibly damaging.
It is, and another common tactic is hoovering,
Hoovering.
where a toxic person, often an ex,
Yeah.
tries to suck you back into the relationship just when you're starting to move on.
Oh.
They might suddenly reappear with apologies or promises to change.
Wasn't that a good thing?
Well, it's possible for people to change.
Yeah.
But with toxic people, these attempts are often insincere.
Yeah.
They're just trying to regain control.
So it's more about them than any genuine desire to reconnect?
Exactly. And then there are smear campaigns where the toxic person tries to isolate you.
Isolate me.
Yeah, by spreading lies and rumors about you, they might try to turn your friends and family against you.
This is all starting to sound very familiar.
Really?
I think I might have encountered a few of these types in my own life.
It's unfortunately more common than you might think.
Yeah.
But before you start feeling overwhelmed, let's move on to the good stuff.
Okay.
Arabi's strategies for protecting yourself.
Okay, let's do it. Okay, so we've identified the problem, these toxic types and their manipulative tactics, but now let's get to the solution.
Right.
You mentioned that Arabi has strategies for dealing with them.
Yeah, she does.
What's the first line of defense?
Well, her action plan really emphasizes 3 key steps: setting boundaries, detaching, and healing. And she doesn't just offer some vague advice. She gets into the specifics of how to actually implement these steps.
Boundaries sound pretty straightforward,
Uh-huh.
but I imagine it's a lot easier said than done,
Oh, absolutely.
especially for HSPs who are naturally inclined to please others.
Absolutely. It's about defining what you will and will not tolerate,
Right.
and then communicating those limits clearly and consistently.
Any tips on how to actually do that? Because that sounds hard.
One technique she suggests is to start small.
Okay.
You don't have to set these huge boundaries all at once.
Right.
Start with something manageable, like saying no to a small request that you would normally feel obligated to agree to.
So it's about building up that no muscle.
Exactly. And the Chinese source actually has a great example of this.
Oh, yeah.
There's this guy named Alex who's always saying yes to his sister's last-minute requests, even when it totally stresses him out.
I know that feeling.
Right. So he finally decides to start practicing saying no.
Good for him.
And even though his sister pushes back at first, she eventually starts to respect his boundaries.
That's encouraging.
It is.
Well, what about situations where setting boundaries feels impossible?
Yeah.
Like with a narcissist who just bulldozes over any limits you try to set.
Well, Arabi has a strategy for that too. It's called gray rocking.
Gray rocking. I've never heard of that. What is it?
It's about becoming emotionally unresponsive to the narcissist's attempts to provoke a reaction.
Okay.
You essentially make yourself as boring and uninteresting as a gray rock.
So you're not giving them the emotional fuel that they're looking for.
Precisely, the less you react, the less power they have over you.
That's a good strategy.
And the YouTube video by Corinne Allure describes this technique as a way to starve the narcissist of attention.
Okay, that makes sense. But what if you can't just gray rock your way out of the situation?
Yeah.
Like what if you have to co-parent with a narcissist
Uh-huh.
or work with one?
Right. In those cases where complete avoidance isn't possible, Arabi recommends fading out.
Fading out.
It's a gradual withdrawal strategy where you slowly reduce contact and interaction.
So you're not cutting them off completely, but you're making yourself less accessible.
Right. It's about creating more space for yourself without making a dramatic exit.
Okay.
Allure actually talks about how she used this technique to distance herself from a toxic friend.
Oh, really?
She gradually reduced the frequency and length of their conversations, and she stopped responding to texts right away.
And that worked.
It did. The friend eventually got the hint and moved on to someone else to drain.
Wow, that's a great example. But sometimes I imagine those more subtle strategies aren't enough.
Right.
What if you're in a situation where you need to get out, like right now?
That's where having a safety plan in place is so crucial, especially if you're dealing with abuse.
What does a safety plan involve?
Well, it's a personalized plan that outlines the steps you will take to ensure your safety if you need to leave a dangerous situation quickly.
Okay.
It might include things like having a bag packed with essentials, having a safe place to go, or even having a code word with a trusted friend or family member.
That sounds incredibly important,
It is.
but also a little bit overwhelming to think about.
Sure.
Where do you even begin?
Well, Arabi really stresses the importance of reaching out for professional help to create a safety plan.
Okay.
Working with a therapist or a domestic violence advocate or even an HR department can provide guidance and support.
So you're not alone in this.
Yeah,
There are people who can help you navigate this process.
absolutely. And once you're out of the immediate danger, Arabi emphasizes the importance of no contact,
No contact.
which I know can sound difficult, especially if you share children or have to interact with this person for other reasons.
Right. Is it always possible?
It's not always easy, but Arabi is adamant about its importance for healing.
Okay.
No contact means cutting off all communication with the toxic person,
All communication.
including blocking them on social media and avoiding places where you might run into them.
But wouldn't that just make them angrier and more likely to retaliate?
It's possible, but the point of no contact is to protect yourself, not to control their behavior.
Right.
It's about reclaiming your power and creating space for yourself to heal.
So it's about prioritizing your own well-being over their reactions.
Exactly. And it's not just about physical distance.
Okay.
It's also about emotional distance. No contact is about detaching from the toxic person's energy and influence.
That makes a lot of sense. So once you've established those boundaries, you've detached. What about the healing process? I imagine the emotional scars can linger long after you've escaped the toxic relationship.
You're absolutely right. And this is where Arabi's insights become truly empowering.
Okay.
She doesn't just focus on surviving toxic encounters.
Yeah.
She emphasizes thriving afterward.
Okay. I'm intrigued. How do you go from surviving to thriving?
It starts with recognizing that healing takes time and it's not linear.
Okay.
There will be ups and downs, moments of anger, sadness, and even guilt.
Sure.
And Arabi really stresses the importance of self-compassion during this process.
Self-compassion. What does that look like in practice?
It's about being kind and understanding with yourself, acknowledging that you did the best you could in a really difficult situation.
Right.
It's about letting go of self-blame and recognizing that you were manipulated.
So it's about shifting from a place of self-criticism to a place of self-care.
Exactly. And therapy can be incredibly helpful in this process.
Okay.
Having a trained professional to guide you through those difficult emotions, process the trauma, and develop healthy coping mechanisms can make a world of difference.
It's like having an emotional coach in your corner helping you navigate the recovery process.
That's a great analogy, and don't underestimate the power of self-care practices.
Yeah.
Things like journaling, meditation, spending time in nature, or engaging in activities you enjoy can really help replenish your emotional reserves and rebuild your sense of self.
So it's about intentionally filling your cup with positive energy after it's been drained by the toxic person.
I love that. And remember, healing isn't just about processing the negative. It's also about rediscovering the positive. It's about reconnecting with your passions, your values, and the things that bring you joy.
So it's about reclaiming your life and your identity outside of the toxic relationship.
Exactly. And this is where Arabi's message goes beyond just dealing with toxic people.
Okay.
She talks about how HSPs can actually turn their sensitivity into a superpower.
Okay, that's where it gets really interesting.
Right.
I'm ready for the superhero origin story. How do HSPs go from being targets to wielding their sensitivity as a strength?
It starts with recognizing that sensitivity isn't just about feeling things more intensely. It's also about perceiving things more deeply.
What do you mean by that?
Well, HSPs are often highly intuitive.
Okay.
They pick up on subtle cues that other people miss.
Like what?
Whether it's a change in someone's tone of voice, a flicker of emotion across their face, or even just a shift in the energy of a room.
So it's like they have this extra sense that allows them to see beneath the surface.
Precisely, and that intuition can be incredibly valuable in navigating the world. It can help you make better decisions,
Okay.
connect with people on a deeper level, and even sense danger before it becomes apparent to others.
Okay, I'm starting to see how this could be a superpower.
Yeah.
But how do you go from feeling overwhelmed by your sensitivity to harnessing it as a strength?
Well, it takes practice and it's an ongoing journey, but Arabi does offer some practical guidance. One thing she suggests is to kind of identify your passions and your values.
Okay.
What causes move you, what activities bring you joy and make you feel really energized.
So it's about channeling that deep feeling into something meaningful.
Exactly. Your sensitivity allows you to connect with the world in a really profound way.
Okay.
You might be drawn to creative pursuits or helping others or advocating for social justice. Those are just a few examples, of course.
So it's about finding your unique contribution, your purpose, and using your sensitivity to fuel that mission.
Yeah, and as you connect with that purpose, it becomes easier to set those boundaries and protect your energy. You're clear about what deserves your attention and what doesn't.
That makes sense. When you have that strong sense of self and a mission that really matters to you, you're less likely to be swayed by those toxic influences.
Precisely. And there's another interesting technique that Arabi offers for dealing with difficult people you can't completely avoid.
Okay, what is it?
It's the idea of observing rather than accusing.
Observing rather than accusing.
This is particularly relevant when you're dealing with narcissists, because they have such fragile egos. Directly confronting them can backfire and lead to more manipulation.
So what do you do?
So instead of calling them out, Araby suggests that you observe their patterns, you gather information, and you mentally prepare yourself for an exit strategy.
So you're almost like a detective gathering evidence before making your move.
Exactly. It's about detaching from the emotional drama and taking a more strategic approach.
I like that.
And this ties into the fade-out technique we talked about earlier. You're gradually reducing contact and making yourself less available without giving them a reason to lash out.
It's like slowly turning down the volume on their access to you.
I like that analogy.
Yeah.
It's about subtly shifting the power dynamic without creating this big confrontation.
But what about those situations where you can't avoid the person altogether, like family gatherings or work events?
Right.
Does Araby have any advice for navigating those really tricky encounters?
She does. She emphasizes the importance of emotional regulation,
Okay.
which can be challenging for HSPs who feel things so intensely.
Sure.
But instead of getting sucked into their drama, she suggests noticing their manipulation tactics, not reacting to them.
It's almost like watching a movie. You know, observing the characters without getting emotionally invested in the plot.
That's a great way to put it. You're acknowledging what's happening, but you're not letting it control your emotional state.
That sounds incredibly freeing, but I have to ask, what about those times when you just can't help but react? We're all human after all.
Of course, we all have moments where we slip up.
Right.
But the key is to practice those emotional regulation techniques so they become more and more automatic.
Okay.
Araby suggests using mindfulness to become aware of your emotional triggers.
Right.
And developing coping mechanisms to manage those really intense feelings.
It's like building a muscle.
Yeah.
The more you use it, the stronger it gets.
Exactly. And she also talks about the power of never explaining.
Never explaining. I'm not sure I understand what that means.
It's about recognizing that you don't owe anyone, especially a toxic person, a detailed explanation of your life or your choices.
Okay.
You have the right to set boundaries without justifying them.
So it's about taking back your power, refusing to play their game.
Yes. And it can be incredibly empowering to simply say, I don't need to explain myself to you.
Yeah.
It shuts down the manipulation and asserts your autonomy.
So if we step back and look at Araby's work as a whole, what's the overarching message she's sending to HSPs?
I think it's a message of hope and empowerment. She's saying that being highly sensitive is not a weakness.
Right.
It's a gift.
Okay.
But it's a gift that comes with responsibilities.
Yeah.
And one of those responsibilities is learning how to protect yourself from those who would exploit your empathy and compassion.
And she's giving HSPs the tools to do just that.
Absolutely. She's providing a roadmap for navigating a world that can feel really overwhelming at times.
Yeah.
And she's reminding HSPs that they have the strength and resilience to not only survive, but thrive.
This has been such an insightful deep dive. I feel like I've learned so much about HSPs, toxic people, and the dynamics that play out between them. What's the one key takeaway you hope listeners will remember from our conversation today?
I think the one key takeaway is that their sensitivity is not a liability, it's superpower.
Yes.
And that with the right tools and strategies, they can navigate the world with confidence and create a life that feels authentic and fulfilling.
I love that. So to wrap things up today, I want to leave our listeners with a question to ponder. If sensitivity is indeed a superpower, as Araby suggests, what missions could you use it for in your own life? Could it be helping others, advocating for a cause you care about, or expressing yourself through creativity? The possibilities are endless.
What a great question to reflect on. And remember, this is just the beginning of the journey.
Yeah.
Exploring your sensitivity, understanding its nuances, and learning to wield it with intention is an ongoing process of growth and discovery.
Well, thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. We'll see you next time for another fascinating exploration.